What's your story about? They ask with stars in their eyes and a sordid kind of innocence that says they really don't know what they're about to get themselves into. I'm glad you asked. But wait, what is my story about? There's the part about the fairy queen prophesying the destruction of the human tyrant, the young savior living in poverty after she saved her people, forever exiled for the choices she was forced to make. The fairy who dreams of becoming a magic engineer despite the discrimination she faces. The rebellious princess who would destroy all humans for her people's safety. The lovelorn Puka who bridges the gap between two worlds. A big sister who would make a deal with the devil to give her little brother a better life. Plague, espionage, court politics, racism, sacrifice, family, redemption. What is my story about? Panic. That's what I feel whenever I have to explain my stories to people. 30 seconds hardly feels like enough to convey the gravity of my work. If I go any longer than that, people get uncomfortable. They fidget, their eyes glaze over. I can tell they want to leave. I don't want to give away the ending, but I don't want to undersell my story. Panic. Panic and dread. How do I boil down the entire world in my head, something that took over 100,000 words to write, the lives and struggles of multiple characters, into just 30 seconds? I can't even tell my husband how my day went in less than 30 seconds. Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepke, and today I'm going to help you learn not to strike out when you give your pitch. Yes, that was indeed a baseball pun. The 2-sentence pitch and the 30-second pitch are a staple in the life of a writer. Not only are they necessary for finding a literary agent to represent your work, they're also a key factor in how you market your story. No one has time for your hour-long thesis on the Christ character in your story and how their sacrifice led to the downfall of a kingdom and the resurrection of a new world of truth, justice, and the Asgardian way. Honestly, they probably don't really want to know about your story at all. They're just being nice. It's up to you not to waste people's time and find a way to hook them before their patience runs out. You are always going to be the first and most fervent fan of your own work. To help you keep a lid on your natural desire to be a stan, today I'm going to teach you how to write a tantalizing pitch in just 2 sentences. Do you have trouble keeping your pitch concise? Does the thought of trying to explain the enormity of your story make your palms sweaty, knees weak, arms heavy? Well, keep the vomit off your sweater because I have a process for you. And because that sweater looks nice on you, it'd be a shame to ruin it. Just like I said over and over in my series on how to write prose, your writing has to be concise and intentional. That is triply important for your pitch. A high-quality pitch shouldn't be more than 2 sentences long, and it needs to have a few identifying features. A main character, that character's greatest desire, a major obstacle to that desire, and a hook. To include all of that information in your pitch, every word and every aspect needs to be carefully considered. The main character is important because it gives your audience an avatar or a focus for the story. It will help them better understand who they're rooting for and how the story relates to them. Do you have multiple characters that equally contribute to the story? Group them together by their most identifiable feature. Are they friends, strangers with a shared past? Whatever it is that unites them, figure it out and define them as a single unit. Any decent character worth their words has a greatest desire. Without the greatest desire, your story has no motivation and your audience has no reason to feign interest. Everyone wants something. Even a Buddhist monk seeks transcendence. If you exist, then you want. Does your character exist? Then they want something. Figure out what that is. A story is not a story without conflict. Don't even try to argue with me about this. If there's no conflict, then nothing happened. Figure out what the greatest conflict of your story revolves around. I'm not talking about your inciting incident here. What is the biggest thing barring your main character from achieving their goal? That is going to be your major obstacle. Lastly, you need to bait the hook. You're trying to capture the interest of your audience even when your audience isn't that interested in what you have to say. Fishermen use bait, tackle, shiny beads, feathers, and whatever else they can work out to try and entice fish. Writers use cliffhangers and twists. Let me show you how it's done. I'm going to use the story I'm working on as a basis for this exercise. It's a fantasy set in another world where fairies and humans are at odds. We'll start with my main character. Her name is Taya. For my pitch, my audience needs to know who she is. Taya is a fairy princess who was excommunicated from her court as a child because she formed a contract with an elemental in order to rescue her people from annihilation by the humans. As an adult, she lives in a homeless encampment called Garbage Town. She can't get a job, humans discriminate against fairies, other fairies hate her. I can't fit all of that into 2 sentences and still convey what happens in the story. For the pitch, I'm going to use the simplest, most relevant description that still is interesting enough to grab people's attention. She's a fairy. Next, I need to have a solid understanding of the major conflict of the story. This is a 4-book series I'm planning, so I'm limiting the major conflict to what happens in the first book. The main character is trying to get into a magic university that doesn't accept fairies as students, despite her big sister's fierce opposition to making peace with humans. She gets an unexpected invitation to try to test into the school, but she fails the test. After stealing her way into the royal library to try and study for her retest, she's nearly captured by royal guards, but is rescued by a professor who promises to teach her. She finally passes the test and is allowed to register for classes, only for her and her sister to fall ill from a plague secretly created by the king to eradicate fairies from his kingdom. She's forced to use her tuition money to pay for a healer, but only has enough money for 1 treatment. Having given up her hope for a future that she wanted for herself, the main character pays for her sister to be treated and retreats to the forest to die alone. While she's in the forest, a power-hungry magician happens upon her and forms a pact with her elementals to save her life. They work together and the elementals expend all of their magic to give consciousness to the elemental of the plague, which forms a new contract with the main character. The plague tries to attack the magician, and the main character barely manages to save her from certain death before she passes out from the effort. So, out of all of that exposition, how do we pick what is the central problem of the story? I always choose based on where the story ends and the first part of the summary that relates to the ending. In this case, the story ends with the main character forming a contract with the plague. The first place that the plague is mentioned in the summary is when she and her sister fall ill to the plague, so that will be our major conflict. Now, pay attention because this next part is extremely important. The greatest desire of the main character acts as a counterpoint to the major conflict. The major conflict describes the middle and end of the story, so your main character's greatest desire has to entail the beginning of the story. I find this part especially easy because all you have to do is ask yourself what your character is working toward in the beginning. In this case, she wants to go to school to become a magical engineer so that she doesn't have to rely on her elementals, thus making the humans and fairies less fearful of her. Now we can put it all together. Taya's hope of being the first fairy to attend the Royal Magic University and become a magical engineer is dashed when she and her sister contract a mysterious magical plague that is decimating the kingdom's fae population. So here we have the main character, Taya, a description of Taya as a fairy, her greatest desire, attending university where fairies are typically barred, and a major conflict of her and her sister contracting a deadly new sickness. That was 1 sentence, by the way, and putting all of that information into 1 sentence was by design. The second sentence of your 2-sentence pitch should be your hook, the thing that makes your audience lift an eyebrow and say, You'll actually find some pretty good candidates for the hook in my summary. The king is behind the magic plague. The main character has to choose to save either her sister or herself, and the main character is going to make a contract with the plague to survive. All of these are truly tantalizing morsels, and we just need to pick one and spin it as if it was a mystery. I actually like all of these options, so I'm going to write out a sentence for each, test them against the first sentence, and figure out which one sounds more interesting. Taya's hope of being the first fairy to attend the Royal Magic University and become a magical engineer is dashed when she and her sister contract a mysterious plague that is decimating the kingdom's fae population. Now, Taya is forced to make an impossible choice. Should she save her sister from the plague, or save herself? That one's okay, but let's see what it would look like with another hook. Taya's hope of being the first fairy to attend the Royal Magic University and become a magical engineer is dashed when she and her sister contract a mysterious plague that is decimating the kingdom's fae population. Hope may not be enough to save Taya and her sister from the machinations of a mad king determined to rid his country of all magical creatures for good. I like that one a little better, but let's try the last one. Taya's hope of being the first fairy to attend a Royal Magic University and become a magical engineer is dashed when she and her sister contract a mysterious plague that is decimating the kingdom's fae population. As the plague rages through the capital city, tension between human and fae royalty is at an all-time high, and Taya's desperate fight for survival will lead her to a decision that very well may be the spark that leads to war. I like that last one the best, and let me explain why. The first option felt kind of flat. It didn't feel as if it raised the stakes of the story at all, and didn't come as a surprise. The second option was a little better with the machinations of a mad king and all, but it ended up a little disjointed from the first sentence. I could be talking about two completely different stories. The last one is my favorite because it continues the theme of the plague in the first part, ups the stakes from a personal matter to a political matter, and indicates that the main character's choices will have a massive impact on the world at large. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked learning about how to write a 2-sentence pitch and want to see more from me about concise writing, check out the video on top where I show you how to write flash fiction. Otherwise, click on the bottom video to see what YouTube recommends. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on CC Writes. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I will see you later.